Join us September 25th, 26th, and 27th for a 3-day special streaming event, Strange Realities, to push the limits of your reality. Featuring authors, academics, researchers, occultists, experiencers, podcasters, and practitioners. All presenting fresh cutting-edge material and research. Streaming live. Featuring presentations by
Brent Raynes,
editor of Alternate Perceptions magazine.
Aaron Goulias,
host of the Saucer Life podcast.
David Metcalf,
writer and researcher.
Alan Greenfield,
author of Secret Cipher of the Ufo,
Stephanie Quick,
writer and blogger.
Red Pill Junkie,
14 researcher and explorer.
Tim Banal,
host of Banal of America.
Guy Malone,
iconoclast and troublemaker.
Timothy Ritter,
host of Strange Familiars.
Kiki Dombrowski,
author and practitioner.
Greg Bishop,
author of Project Beta.
Jenny Ashford,
host of 13 O'Clock.
Recluse,
host of The Farm.
Jack Montgomery,
Folk Magic.
Joshua Cutchin,
author of Thieves in the Night.
Reverend Michael Carter,
Alien Contact Experiencer.
Dr. Future,
host of Future Quake.
Tony Kale,
author of Memphis Hoodoo.
Rin Collier,
occultist.
Soraya Askath,
host of Where Did the Road Go? And John Tinney, Ghost Stalkers and Hell.
All 3 days, only $20. Tickets and info available at strangerealitiesconference.com. Brought to you by the Conspirinormal podcast. Conspirinormal.com. Strange Realities.
Okay, well, we're ready to get started. Welcome back to Conspirinormal, guys. It's episode 325. I'm losing count.
Yeah, right along.
Yeah,
as
absolutely. As things get going, but we've got another kind of like roundtable tonight discussion, and was originally going to have Brent Raynes on by himself, but Brent's pulled in someone else to talk with us that hasn't been on the show, and that's Robert Davis. And I want to give kind of a Brent, you sent me something here to kind of introduce you guys, and then I'll read these and I'll bring you and Robert on. So first about Robert. Robert Davis is an internationally recognized scientist in his field and has served as a professor at the State University of New York for over 30 years. Bob graduated with a BA and MA from the City University of New York and with a PhD in sensory neuroscience from the Ohio State University. He has published over 60 articles in scholarly journals, lectured at national and international conferences, and was awarded several major grants by the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health to fund research in the neurosciences. After retiring from his role as professor and researcher, he wrote 3 books: The Ufo Phenomenon, entitled The Ufo Phenomenon Should I Believe?, Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence, and most recently, Unseen Forces, the Integration of Science, Reality, and You. Bob has published articles and lectured on these topics at national and international conferences. His website is bobdavisspeaks.com. And Mr. Brent Raynes. Brent Raynes became interested in the UFO phenomenon early in 1967 at age 14. Soon after reading Flying Saucers, Serious Business by the late Frank Edwards. Initially, he was a quote-unquote nuts and bolts ET advocate, though soon the writings of researchers like John Keel, Jacques Vallée, and Brad Steiger caused young Raynes to cast a much wider net that included much under the broad umbrella of the paranormal. Since 1985, Raynes has edited Alternate Perceptions magazine, and he's written 3 books: Visitors from Hidden Realms, On the Edge of Reality, and John A. Keel, The Man, the Myths, and the Ongoing Mysteries, which we interviewed you about last year.
Yep.
And Brent, if anyone was at the Strange Realities conference, Brent was there selling books in the back, and he was also part of our Q&A session. So, Robert, Brent, welcome. Well, Robert, welcome to Conspirinormal, and Brent, welcome back.
Thank you, guys.
It's a pleasure to be with you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolute pleasure to have you guys on too. So I want to start with you, Robert. I did read kind of like your background, professional background, but I kind of want to get an idea of how you became interested in like these particular subjects, all this kind of weird stuff that we like to talk about.
Well, I ask myself the same question as does my wife, and we can't come up with an answer. So I just scratch my head. It's it's a combination of innate, combination of watching Star Trek as a kid, and then having some personal experiences with the orange orbs in the night sky in Sedona, Arizona, about 7-8 years ago that motivated me to write that first book, The Ufo Phenomenon. Something about it. I think we all have that sense of knowingness that there's something there. We don't know what it is. Can't put our foot on it. We interact with it. It interacts with us. Some of us may be successful. And I never had that kind of a direct experience, but I did have a Kundalini experience, as Brent well knows, which was earth-shaking in many ways, but enlightening in other ways. Kind of like reinforming me that there is something significantly more going on that does involve consciousness, very possibly an alternate reality, something far greater than this. What that is the enigma, of course. But you guys, and not only you, people unique to you, those in your field and our field in general, we're striving to figure this out, and we all come at it obviously from different angles. But you collectively put it together. I can't help get off. And I told Brent last time, Brent, I'm done with this. I'm hanging it up. Last book, last interview, and here I am with you guys. How many times you hear that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how to explain it.
And those insights are from a person with the background in neuroscience. You're not your usual new agey type. You have this extremely scientific background, and you view all this phenomenon in light of where it intersects with neuroscience.
I try to, but it's hard to form any conclusions, which is the frustrating aspect to this. More questions than answers, of course, and you have to live in that environment, especially when you can't apply the scientific method the way you want to right. Analyze all this that's going on. So there's such a mismatch there, and that's so frustrating. It really is. So I'm retired, so I can bullshit about this. I can open up, come out the closet, so to speak.
Yeah.
And there is indeed hesitancy. I really do feel defensive. Less so now after I've done many shows and talked more about it. I feel more open. So for instance, I never talked about my Kundalini experience, if you want to call it that, but I did have all the symptoms of it. I wouldn't reveal that. That's the point. I've in the last, 6 months or so, I've began discussing my personal agenda as to why I guess I'm also more intently involved with this, and which led to my involvement with Brent and Free, doing some research on thousands of experiences, which Brent was a vital part of. Many people, certainly our experiences, all walks of life, and we know this, but they have intent interest. They listen to your shows. They read all these books. They're not gonna open up their mouth for obvious reasons. Some do, we know that, but few and far between. So you get a little bit more courage when you could speak out without fear of retribution, certainly. But yeah, you do look over your shoulder, and you do wonder what people think. And of course, some people who think you're weird. Of course. But today's science fiction is tomorrow's science fact, kind of thing. And much of the stuff we talk about is bullshit. A lot of it is fact. We do touch upon future truth. We do. But you don't know exactly where it is. But we do get there. We can't put our finger on it, but we smell it. We think about it. We're limited by our knowledge, but we know it's there and we sense it, but we can't answer it. So we talk sense and nonsense, me included. I'm brilliant at times, and I'm the biggest bullshitter at times, about this. You can't, the point is this, you can't speak with intense ego like I have the answer. I'm tired of hearing that from so many people. I never want to come across like that. And maybe I do, because I've lectured my whole life. So I come across like I'm, lecturing in a way, formal. That's me. That's the way I bullshit. So I don't have the answers. Nobody does. And you're right. Sometimes you do think you'd have the answers. I remember times I say, it's the trickster. My dear friend Rosemary Ellen Guiler, you guys know her. She published my last book, Unseen Forces, Integration of Science, Reality, and You. Brent, of course, knows her very well. We worked with her. Dear person, contributes so much to the field. And so many, I mean, nobody can duplicate her ingenuity, creativity, and production. I told her, you're crazy. Get a life. 60+ books.
But she was amazing. She was really one of the first people that I ever really started listening to back in the day.
Brilliant. But then she had a heart, and my gosh, I miss her. So I never thought I'd miss her so much as I do. We had a strong connection. I think most people who do know her have that strong connection. There was something different about her. Yeah, I mean, other than wearing black all the time, get off it, Rosemary. What is this bullshit? Black, you know what I mean. You can kid with her, and we'd spend some time in Australia with her wonderful husband, who she only knew for a couple of years, but she had her happy last years. But she was in the same field as you guys, and Brent, not me. I come from academia. Last 5-6 years, Brent knows, I got involved with the free. Brent and I did a lot of work together, analyzing qualitative statements from people who claim to be experiences with the UFO phenomenon. But, we maybe have been looking at two different phenomenons, the nuts and bolts physical phenomenon, but then non-human intelligences or entities of another phenomena, or many different phenomena. Most of the people who claim to have interacted with non-human entities of all types, mainly grays, short, tall, human-looking being the most common, but of all types and sizes, a wide spectrum. They, I forgot my point. What was I saying? Anyway, they said their interactions with these beings was from a non-physical perspective, not actually being taken physically and relocated to another location, like on board a ship or elsewhere. About Brent, what percent? 10, 15% may say they were taken on board. 10% or so did say they had sexual interactions of some type and involved with hybrid babies, but to a much lesser extent than is usually proclaimed by those who do research in that field, Bud Hopkins, etc., via hypnotic regressions. Not a very accurate technique, nevertheless. So we did get some compelling information about not only the kinds of interactions that take place in terms of physical and non-physical interactions, meaning mainly telepathic in nature, or one's consciousness being abducted as opposed to the physical body. People claim, as you well know, these wild claims of being floating in space, going to different places in space, interacting with beings of various type and receiving messages. We can go on and on talking about this in such an intricate detail. I don't know if your audience would be bored of it or not, but we can spend never-ending hours discussing it, Brent being the one who can more than anybody. And it's a source of entertainment. We kick around stories of events, anecdotal evidence, things that people experience either via hypnotic regression or through freeze research with over 3,200 individuals who claim to have conscious recall. And we take their word for it, conscious recall of their interaction with other beings. Well, so it's a limitation, but of the 3,200, a good percentage did indeed have conscious recall, as opposed to hypnagogic or sleep transition recall, or a lucid dream recall, or some other type of recall, like on the DMT. The point is an altered state of consciousness. We tried not to exclude those kinds of states, although sometimes those states may very well be insightful, like the DMT state, where people claim to interact. In fact, that's what led to my interview with Brent on his podcast on Alternate Perception Online magazine, probably the best thing going out there for people to view and learn from as a resource for information in our field.
Well, let's talk about free. I want to get to kind of like the details of this study a little bit, because I know I've heard about it. I knew that it was going on for quite some time. I think it concluded in 2018. But and either one of you to feel free to like to hop in on this. But what was free? What did those that acronym stand for? Who was being studied? What were some of the results that were being studied?
Okay, well, I'll of course, it stands for the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters.
Mm-hmm.
And it really was in the beginning, it was Ray Hernandez, who at the time lived in Miami, Florida. I'm not sure he was planning to move to New York recently. I'm not sure if he's made that transition yet, but he had some experiences back in 2004, he claimed, and it was a series of experiences with non-human intelligence. And to his wife, these were religious experiences. To him, this was, he began to feel it was extraterrestrial. And ultimately, he got in touch, trying to find someone he could communicate with about what was happening, because it was quite disturbing to him. And he ended up, this researcher down in Australia, Mary Rodwell, and she put him in touch with Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, the sixth man to walk on the moon back in 1971, who was very interested in UFOs and the paranormal. And he made a number of visits to his home there in Florida. And he put him in touch with Rudolph Shield, who is a astrophysicist who's also very interested in UFOs. So between the four of them, I understand, they ended up creating the Free Organization, and Edgar Mitchell and Rudolph Shield and Mary Rodwell said they would help him, and he pulled in a lot of people with scientific backgrounds like Bob here, and got them involved in helping to analyze all of this data. He put out notices like crazy that he wanted people's response to the surveys, which was one that was like over 600 questions, yes, no type answers, and then there was the quantitative, and then there was the qualitative, which I think was a little less than 100 questions, where you had to go into some real detail. And quite quickly on, these reports came in from all over the globe. And I know when I came on board, I was asked, along with other members, of course, Barbara Mango was one, and of course Bob, and they wanted us to just kind of pick and choose some of the best cases. We'd all got like 200 to look at, and these were all part of a Survey Monkey questionnaire. And so we went through the data, made suggestions. John Climo, a psychologist out in California, who has studied all kinds of paranormal material and channeling, and written books on channeling, and I think reincarnation and such. And he was a big part of that, going through that data. And it was all put together for the book Beyond UFOs that was published, I think 2018 now. But anyway, Bob, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful overview. And Ray was a motivating factor for getting this questionnaire off the ground. It was largely adapted from Dr. Kenneth Ring, who utilized that questionnaire in a study he did with non-near-death experiences and individuals who claimed to have been abducted. And those questions focused on not only the physical aspects of that, the interaction, the abduction-like experience, but also the non-physical as well, and details of their experience, certainly, descriptions of the aliens, the craft, etc. So there's a spiritual, there's physical, there's non-physical. It did cover a lot of a broad spectrum of issues that address their interaction. So we got so much data. We utilize a research analyst, Dr. Russell Scott Poem, to help us analyze that data. We needed an expert, and he certainly was one. This massive amount of data was synthesized, trying to figure out the most important aspects of this information. We're talking about 3,200 individuals. We're talking about 600 questions each. That's a lot of information, and nevertheless, it was accepted. Our document, which reviewed the study, analyzed the results, and formed some conclusions, was published by a leading scientific organization, the Journal of Scientific Exploration, in 2018, and you can access that online via the Journal of Scientific Exploration. The main findings: about 70 to 80% thought that their contact experience changed their life in a positive way. It's not always positive. We do hear negative reports, and we did see that as well, where about 15-20% said it was negative. And they described their negative experience largely with creatures that look scary, right? The reptilians. So there was more of a negative experience associated with those interactions with beings like that versus human looking, not surprisingly, especially the real sexy ones, right? As many are described. That blonde hair, perfect, right? How many times we hear that? Perfect looking. They describe these
kind of like Aura Raynes, right?
Yeah.
Not related.
You know what? I just look, and I'm gonna regret saying this. It looks like the woman they created, the new sex robot, or whatever you want to call it, worth $100,000. Look at her. Anyway, we get back on the right track here. What is uniquely interesting too is that a subset of this population, roughly I think about 1,100 of them, out of them about 80-85% did not want their contact experience to end. They wanted to keep on having these abductions, and we saw this more frequent, a more positive outlook about the experience in those who were abducted more frequently, whereby we actually did separate individuals into separate groups by the number of their abductions. From 1 to 1 to 3 is another group, you know what I mean, 5 to 6, more than 10, that kind of thing. Those clearly, with the increasing abductions, we clearly saw a corresponding association with increase in positivity of their experience, a desire to continue, benefits received, which were spiritual, which were in the form of insights about life, about love, about what's material, about religion, placing less importance on that, less importance on money, on materialization. Materialism, that is, it goes on and on about how they change on a personal level, philosophical level, whereby people who know them, we know what I'm going to say. People who know them don't know them anymore. They change so much, like non-near-death experiences, and that's what's interesting too, because these people that we're looking at who claim to interact with other beings via the UAP and not a UAP. Keep that in mind. We're only talking about the UAP phenomena. We're talking about just interacting with people, not associated again with the UAP. It's not a more non-physical thing. When you start throwing out who here has interacted with non-human entities, the majority of them will say, I have, but it didn't involve a UAP, whereas a minority of that group will say, well, it did. For us, it did, Right. It seems to be like that. At least that's what the 3,200 people showed in our group.
That's why I've always said to myself, and one of the conclusions that I've come to is that like the UFO phenomenon or UAP phenomenon is something that, and the alien contact or abduction phenomenon are two different things in many ways.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing. The physical and the non-physical. So that could very well be the most significant aspect of our results and the positivity outcome. That says a lot,
but that transformative aspect that you view in other things like other psychedelic experiences, other things that you call peak experiences. It's the same kind of transformative change in the individual.
And the fact is, apparently, this phenomenon is so complex that it also involves the impact on the individual, and maybe that's the most interesting aspect of the whole phenomena, is that it does have that dramatic impact, and yet we ignore it. We look for the nuts and bolts, the landing evidence, crop circles, which is another story, and that's real too, probably associated with the UAPs in some way or another intelligence, whatever that is, but But what led to this all, and what I had forgotten earlier and now remembered was the DMT. People who have the DMT, people who have near-death experiences, largely have similar outcomes to our subjects who reported interaction with non-human entities. For some reason, there was a dissolution of ego, regardless of the facilitating event, whether it is the out of body, the near death, the here's a being that just appeared at the foot of my bed, all other wild and crazy things that happen to people, and all of them are a little different in some ways, but similar enough to say there is certainly something going on. This just can't be all bullshit or hallucinations. There is, in some cases, a lot of bullshit and a lot of hallucinations, but no, not in every case. Of course not. Come on, it's something deep, and we're far from the answer. But it's quite interesting. But there is a similarity, because I think people come to the realization of another reality. They come to a knowingness based on their experience that it was so unusual, so far out, but yet so meaningful and deeply, deeply impacting at the spiritual level, at the essence of my soul. Now I know. They all say, don't they say this? You heard it. I know now what life's about. I know now XYZ. I know that level of knowingness, to the point where they know they're not their body. I don't know what that's about. I can say the words, I know I'm not my body. Well, I think I'm not, but I don't know it. When you know it, life changes. It's like an instinct, if I knew it like the back of my damn hand, life's different. That's what happens to these people. And that's cool. So in a way, I want to be an experiencer. In a way I am, but not at that level. And these people that have had these contact experiences, they're like a hungry dog. I want more. It's really cool. And something, when I had my Kundalini experience, I purposely asked for it again from the person who facilitated it through a channeling experience, just talking. And besides the talking, channeling somehow, I can't explain it, some energy into me. It made me shake. It made me feel wonderful. I was uncontrolled. Brent knows, we discussed it. I was in a spiritual emergency for months following that, but it had many benefits too. I was different. I think I integrated, but in a positive way, but negative emotions, anxiety, what happened to me, all that stuff. That's a drag, but everybody experiences
that's part of it. But then it seems like, in so much of just the history of humanity and in more traditional societies now, still, these type of transformative experiences are such a big part of coming of age. They have ritualized forms of these experiences, but maybe, we are really lacking in these, especially in the West. And it seems like these experiences are being actually, forced on people pretty much, because that might have something to do with the fact that we need this, but it's absent in our culture.
Yeah, and this really is why, since we were going to be talking about the first book I wrote back in 2004, Visitors from Hidden Realms, because I dealt with shamans and their techniques and a lot of the ancient history here, and mentioned the Hopi Indians and the Kachinas, the medicine man that I interviewed in Pennsylvania who was in touch with these beings, the Yadushkar, which he felt were extraterrestrial and very tall, giant beings, and of course in this there's these different cultures that use the ayahuasca, like in Peru, and the studies like Dr. Rick Strassman, his book, The DMT, the Spirit Molecule, and how he noticed in the beginning that he was thinking, well, I'm going to subject these volunteers. He had 60 altogether from 1990 to 1995, and he did about 400 doses total, and he got government funding for this and had to get permits. It was a lot of work, but he did it at a hospital out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And suddenly, when he went to question them about their experiences, he expected, just religious stuff, the perhaps NDE archetypal type imagery, and these people were were saying, no, these were real. This was more real than real. And he kept hearing that over and over. So he realized, I've got to, instead of saying like, whoops, sorry about that. Instead of saying there's, what did you hallucinate or what did you visualize? I had to say, what sort of being, what kind of memories do you have? I had to change the dialogue. He even got to the point where he started corresponding with a physicist about the theories about quantum physics and things, and black, dark energy, and thinking maybe they're seeing into another dimension or something. And he noticed a lot of the reports were very similar to alien abduction reports that John Mack, the professor from Harvard, had been written 2 books about, and had been studying this phenomena. And so, that's why I did this interview with Bob recently. Was he had posted in what used to be the free site on Facebook for the last 5 years. Now has become CCRI, which is studying all the contact modalities, as they call it, which I think is a great name. You've got the DMT, or you've got the near-death experiences. And anyway, trying to make a long story short here, the Beyond UFOs and Dr. Strassman's book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule, these are all referenced in a study which I was discussing with Bob, which he brought up on this Facebook page, about how a study was done by researchers from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yes,
and,
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, that's a very important study. Yeah,
and they used the free study, and the kind of things that they were getting with people who were describing conscious memories, but having very similar descriptions of these experiences as DMT users. It was very real to them, and so Bob kind of reopened that door, and I thought he would make a great guest on this show to not only talk about what was in my book from 2004, but kind of bring this up to date with this study and how our involvement with free and the publication of Beyond UFOs and Bob's participation in the Journal of Scientific Exploration report is very insightful. And so, yeah, I don't,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on that note, that study done by medical personnel, researchers at Johns Hopkins University, which again appeared in the Journal of Psychopharmacology just recently, and it has been cited in many news outlets, on the internet, etc. But throughout their article, they made reference to ours, I'd say 8 to 10 times, in terms of the general similarity of results from their subjects, again, who were given DMT, and our subjects, who we talked about earlier. And despite the dissimilarities of their experience, the fact is that they nevertheless shared many positive outcomes, and that related again to the greater interest in understanding themselves and others. They appreciated nature more. I like to always mention that I after my Kundalini experience, I wanted to hug trees, and I did. I just had an urge because I took it for granted, and I realized, something, that darn thing is alive and it's beautiful and it can offer me something. But the thing is this: is that an act of psychosis? You know what I mean? It resulted from my experience. It's now gone away, but I like to thought it integrated it, whereby I do appreciate nature more than I used to. I don't hug trees, however, but I do. I've kind of toned it down. But these people are saying they're more concerned about the welfare of the planet. They understand themselves better. That they're more open to the possibility of extraterrestrial life, whatever that is, maybe interdimensional stuff. Their sense of a greater meaning in life has been fulfilled, achieved. So they're more interested in spirituality and psychic phenomena, more spiritual, I guess. They're still they're search for answers more. We are that way naturally for whatever reason. Why are you guys doing what you're doing? Why are we all? Look at Brent. He's doing active research, traveling, interacting with people to seek answers. That's quite unique. He's not being paid for that. He just has that burning desire. You got it. And we all, and the flame gets hotter and cooler. Right now, Brent, right? I'm cooler. Like I'm backing away. Sometimes you get a little too close, you get burned. A lot of people go down this rabbit hole and do experience something, and it's often not pleasant, or at least it's so different that it's anxiety provoking. But
that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
But it can lead to more concern and interest in spiritual matters and what is truly important. Like hugging trees, maybe that should be normal. We should love and seek that level of interaction and appreciation out of something like a tree. Maybe if we did, we'd enjoy life. Part of it would enjoy life more. So you get glimpses of that desire, and you say to yourself, why did I? What happened? You talk to psychologists about it, and the answers are going to be in the form of hallucinatory, dissociation, schizophrenia, of course, temporary psychosis, all that sort of stuff. So you're given pills that are not necessary. In some cases it is when you have great anxiety from it, however. But nevertheless, we pierce a veil. These people pierce a veil, and more psychologists, sociologists are indeed becoming more interested in these experiences because there is some information here that is useful. In fact, it is piquing the interest of Senator Rubio. Just was it yesterday? You all are quite probably aware of it. Is he not the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee? Please correct me. And he's pushing the issue to his credit, and he's not alone, but he's leading the charge for the government, whoever, to open up and share what they know about UFOs. They want to get to the bottom of it, and good for them. They should. And it's coming from within. It's about darn time. Although we saw this in the 60s too, and nothing comes of it. So, yeah.
That's always something that just gets pushed down the road, though. The whole disclosure thing. I think that something like the Free study and the John Hopkins study is far more important. I think that's the real disclosure, in my opinion. Just because the fact that what we're dealing with here, guys, I mean, it's really our expression of religious experience, essentially, and the transformative expression of of being in contact with some kind of spiritual realm.
Yeah, and this is, it goes way back before 1947, and I think the expression contact modalities is a great thing, and that's what CCRI now used to be free. Now it's CCRI, Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, which will look at all of these different expressions, not just the UFO contact syndrome, but it will include near-death experiences. They've got, I think, one of the top people in that field. They've got about, 25 PhDs and about 5 MDs who are lined up to assist with this program, and coming out with instead of one book, as with Beyond UFOs, I think pretty soon they're going to come out with about 3 different volumes. And I don't know how far this will go, but it looks like it's, collecting a lot of good people to pursue this thing.
Yeah, it's important work, and especially it's really looking at this phenomenon and really taking it seriously and pulling it really kind of out of the woo factor of it and saying, this is like what I just said, this is modern day religious experience. I mean, essentially that's what it is.
What's interesting of the Free study, if we just can maybe focus on another very important aspect of it.
Sure.
It appeared in our article again, and it also shared similarities to the results of the John Hopkins study. If I remember correctly, in about 700 of our subjects, they answered one question that incorporated certain criteria. And one of the criteria that had to be met was that they claim to have interacted with a non-human intelligence in this alternate matrix reality. Is that you or me?
That's me.
Is that what is that? An Amber Alert? What's going on?
Yes.
Okay.
So in addition to that important criteria of meeting that NIH, let's call it, non-human intelligence, NIH, they also claim to have 10 individual contact experiences of a non-physical nature. Non-physical. So they weren't, again, physically relocated from wherever to onboard a separate spaceship, another environment. And at the matrix reality that we called it, we just defined it for them, but all other space-time, that outside the body kind of perception, we again clarified that from our perspective, that was as real as talking to a family member. So those three criteria had to be met. It was, to them, a very valid interaction with an NHI. Then, given those criteria, and here again, about 600-700 a subset of the 3,200 individual were the only ones who met that criteria. That's why, but still a very large sample size. Now, here again, this is why, and this is curious, why ufology in general does not discuss these results, because this is saying a lot, yet entirely, as far as I'm concerned, ignored by ufology and science in general.
Yeah.
And it's important, I think, or at least it should try to be duplicated in a separate independent study. That's the scientific method, right? It adds more validity, of course, to our results if it's similar. Well, we just got that, in a sense, at the John Hopkins study, but it was not involving NHI from a non-physical way, or from a UAP, but still they did share similarities, which is certainly intriguing. But the point is this: for those who met these three criteria, the majority, something like, here, memory is going to escape me, but something like 50-60% said that when they had this experience, they weren't in their physical body. So there's an OBE aspect certainly to it, and that's why it's of a non-physical nature. They do say. And in other questions that related to, did you feel separated from your body? Was your consciousness separated from your body? 70-80% said, yeah, it was. And then they talk about how their thoughts are sped up, how there's alterations in time and space. Things are very different. Things are more vivid, more colorful. We hear this in the ears, right? Beautiful landscape, colors that are so brilliantly colored, it's beyond description. All of that. It's like the real experience becomes capitalized with exclamation points. There's just something about it that's much more dramatic than we can ever imagine until we are actually there. Or it's a brain glitch, a brain event, which I don't think so. But you can't ignore it. You have to look at it, and science does. But if you ask a neuroscientist, neurologist, what's going on with these people, they'll give you a neuroscience, neurological answer. Why? Because that's all they know. What else? Or it's a psychological answer according to them. What else are they going to say? And they do have some foundation. There's some evidence, the brain glitches, the temporal lobe seizures, other areas of the brain when there are problems. So people do feel alterations of time. People do feel that they're outside their body. They do have similar kinds of experiences, but still, I've looked at them, still not the same by far. Still not that it doesn't involve interaction with other beings, deceased relatives, etc. Still quite different in nature. So I don't think we can draw the parallel, but you still can't help but ask that question. So they feel that they're in this matrix. They were in another reality. Okay, what is that? I don't know. Is it real? That's the obvious question. Are they seeing a different world? That's the ultimate question, is it not? Or are they seeing this world differently? And that's it. And if they are seeing a different world, holy mackerel, doesn't that answer a lot of questions? How do we get at that? How do we prove it? You can't. Other than, an article in a journal like this, people are saying it, and they feel it's as real as the back of their hand. Well, what does that do to scientists who are reading it? Nothing. It's not compelling. It's anecdotal, and it's not following the scientific method in the manner in which they like. And it's not explainable. It's not falsifiable. It's not reproducible. It happens spontaneously. It is so far out in left field in terms of an experimental design, they ignore it. They don't want any part of it. Too dirty. But there is truth here. And it's a needle in a haystack. But what is that truth is the answer. Question, that is.
Yeah. The way that I kind of look at it is that you have where people can kind of confuse the mechanism for, I guess, the experience itself. In other words, they think that the mechanism is what causes the experience, when it's rather that it's a mechanism that this other side, or whatever we want to call this, uses to communicate with us. So like something like what you just talked about with the temporal lobe flare-ups, or just whatever there is a physical, like with sleep paralysis, there's a physical process going on. There's no doubt of that. However, within that physical process, it's used as a means of communication with this other realm.
You mentioned it, a very, very critical point. That is the question. Exactly. What comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. And they're probably interrelated. At some level, there's an interaction. It's a symbiotic kind of interrelationship there. I've thought long and hard about that. I applaud you for thinking of it. Yeah. You know what it reminds me of? I mentioned this in my book, Unseen Forces, that neuroanatomist, Jill Taylor, very good book, Stroke of Insight. It's a very popular book. I certainly endorse it. Very easy to read and insightful. She was a young woman. She had a stroke. It shut down the left hemisphere of the brain. And you can learn a lot from people who have these kinds of abnormalities. Science, medicine learns a lot from things that are in a haywired state, unfortunately for the person, but it can be informative. Well, the left side of the brain, okay, it processes language, it's logical thought that goes on there, a lot of stuff. But she described that it was strange feelings. She was at one with the universe. She had this inner peace. She felt a level of contentment never had before, and she thought that by the right hemisphere of the brain, that half that was in control during her stroke, she thinks that it was associated with an increase in intuition, which she claims she had during that time when the left brain was shut down. I'm more intuitive, she says. She says, I see the big picture. I see there's no boundaries. You're part of it all. You're interrelated with the universe. All that stuff we hear, right? That people say. Either they have a Kundalini experience, or they have an out-of-body experience, or some meditative. You know what I mean. It's facilitated in so many ways, but they whatever, right? They go up. They go to up the stairs. Well, bada bing. She was left with the impression, that when the left hemisphere is not functioning, and that's important because why? People who meditate, it suppresses left hemisphere. Near-death experience, it certainly suppresses left hemisphere. When you shift away from logical thought, and you see this in different experiments, you shift away, you stop the left hemisphere from its activity, people gain greater insight. It's like going into I forget the wave now. One of the Schumann resonance of planet Earth, 7.8 hertz. It's like like a theta wave of the brain. When you go into a deep meditative state, you go into this nice slow wave activity. That's what's similar to the resonance of the ionized gases, the geomagnetic field of the Earth. It's a coincidence. You know what I mean? We're interconnected. Of course, Sagan used to talk about this all the time. We're space stuff. We see evidence of this interrelationship. Well, the Schumann resonance too. Very interesting. That's 7.8 hertz. We have that in our brain. That's a theta wave, right? So I tend to play that when I meditate, binaural beats. It's cool. whatever turns you on. Flute. I like flutes too. Native American flutes, right? Something about it. You resonate with it. So what's the point? What's the point? She's saying that my right hemisphere is interrelating with something that gives me this great awareness, this interrelationship, which I felt too during that Kundalini. I know what she's talking about. But again, it's words, and it's not the essence of feeling. So I think I know what she's talking about. And, who knows for sure, right? But maybe, again, like what you're saying, there is some brain stuff here. But whatever the phenomenon is, it is interacting with our brain, allowing it to better become more sensitive, fine-tuning it to interact better with them. And they do a poor job. When they do their thing, either the UFOs or these beings or whatever they do a poor job trying to show us, hey, we're here. I want, you people on Earth, you should be aware that we're here. Okay. Look at me. I'm flying in the sky. Look at me. I'm Fatima. Look at me. I'm lights around, going around in circles. Look, you know what I mean? I'm doing a 45-degree angle. Are you convinced now? You guys can't do it, but we can, because we're not Earthlings, I think a lot of these, these cowboys, alien cowboys, and maybe they're just that. A lot of them are just that. They're saying this is their way of a Saturday night out. Hey, let's turn some heads. Let's teach them. I'm acting a little silly here, I know, but why did they do what they do? That's my point. Yeah. Why did they do what they do?
Well, do you anytime speculate that something might be guiding us as a collective humanity, or that they're kind of pushing these transformative experiences on people because we have to change, maybe for survival or for whatever our next step is going to be?
Wow. There's more insightful, knowing people who are better equipped to handle that kind of a question than me. But that is an ultimate question. I wish I had the answer, man. I wish the heck I can give you the lowdown.
Do you speculate that?
I speculate,
yeah. Speculate it?
Yeah, I speculate to this level. I tell my wife, I put my hand kind of like upside down. My fingers are pointed downward, right? And what am I doing? I dangle my fingers. You know what I'm trying to do? And I go like a puppeteer. I feel somebody's playing me. It freaks her out. It freaks her out. But the point is, I felt that. Now, yeah, it could be a level of whatever. Make believe. Who the heck knows? But it's real to me, so it's real. That's it. So I do feel that because of a series of wild events that have happened. You go down this rabbit hole, and bada bing, things happen. And they happen for a reason. I think you create it in a way. You're asking for it, you're going to get it. You create it, or you increase the probability of it happening by the things you do, the people you interact with, the things you read, all that. You look, you search, you talk, you actively. Look at Brent. He's running all over the place, searching for an answer. What a truth seeker. I commend you, son of a bitches. I commend you to the nth degree. You did it your whole life. While I'm sitting in a laboratory, trying to publish an article, right, quickly, so I get tenured. We come from different universes, but I'm free.
Yeah, I come from the SOB side.
Yeah, but it's
trying to connect the dots. That's all we're left with, is trying to connect the dots. And ufology, the mainstream ufology has been so divided, and you had the contactees, Space Brothers, you had the psycho spiritual thing really heavy back in the early 50s on. It was George Adamski and Howard Menger and all of them, and then you had the major UFO organizations. They complained about the Air Force, like NICAP, and yet lo and behold, they made the same mistakes the Air Force did. If a being steps out of the craft or it lands, it's got to be a hoax. If someone reports more than one UFO encounter, they're a repeater. They can't tell the difference between a flying craft or something of anomalous nature and the planet Venus on the horizon. And it really took with Dr. Hynek, meeting Jacques Vallée in 1963 to find out that, hey, these stories from France, the wave they had back in 54, contained all these elements that he'd been ignoring, and then he took seriously the investigation in Zacarona, Mexico, of the landing there in 64 with that police officer, Zamora, or how we pronounce his name. And suddenly, there was a shift. But we still, if to Hynek for years, and I think this is in his book, The UFO Experience, if someone had reported more than one UFO, it was dismissed because a lot of times they felt it was the repeater element. They were just mistaking all these things, street lights and Venus and weather balloons or whatnot, and they weren't getting. But now Strieber and I think Bud Hopkins, they drove the point home in 1987 with Communion and Intruders, with the fact that there is something really strange going on here, the alien abduction, and they concentrated on that and began to say, well, okay, these people have had experiences going back to childhood. There is something to it, but still they wanted to focus just on the cases where it looked like ETs were involved, and like with Bud Hopkins, I know John Keel tried to introduce Hopkins, who was a New York artist, and really was, this whole hypnosis thing was new to him, and he tried to educate him about some of the dangers of hypnosis and to cast a wider net, which he said that Hopkins didn't want to do. If someone mentioned a poltergeist, he said they didn't discuss that there at his meetings. But if someone mentioned, I had a dream of a gray, oh yeah, let's dive into some hypnosis here. And Keel, I know, had commented that what they weren't counting on was the fact that the unconscious mind could be a trickster too,
Mm-hmm. Right, right, and also the whole thing about hypnosis being itself an altered state of consciousness, so that when people are probably going under hypnosis, they're probably actually having the experience right then as you're talking to them. That's the possibility that I think a lot of people don't look at. That this might not be memory. This might be happening.
I remember a case. Can't remember the name of the woman, but she was. These investigators decided to follow her, and suddenly she was having this experience, seeing these aliens. The only problem was she was having it. They weren't. They were like, she's just laying there, kind of in an altered state of consciousness, obviously, and she's experiencing that something that's real to her, but not to them. And Carl Jung, the late great Swiss psychologist who came up with introvert and extrovert, worked with Sigmund Freud, and he was came up with this archetypes of the collective unconscious versus the personal unconscious, and that people who had no familiarity with certain things would experience these recurring symbols and themes that actually had more meaning in other cultures or cultural settings than the one they had been raised in. And he felt that the mandala might, for example, be something that would be a visionary experience that people would say, oh, I've seen a flying saucer. And he spent quite a bit of time looking at historical accounts of strange tubes and spheres and things, and a modern 50s contactee. I can't remember his name, but I remember he spent several pages on that. And he described something he called the Psychoid Experience, where he said this might be relevant to the UFO phenomena. He said that he was with a group of 4 people who were standing there by a psychic medium, and these 4 people were trying to show Jung where to look. There was this moon-shaped orb type thing hovering over the guy's abdomen. They could clearly see it, they said, but they couldn't get Jung to see it. And they were quite puzzled, shocked, disturbed by that fact. And he said, he wrote that he had known a number of instances similar to that experience, and that was one he had himself, and he was sure that they were sincere in saying they could see this thing, but he was equally sure that he couldn't see it. So 4 could see it, 1 couldn't. I know we have Angelia Shear, who is right up here in Nashville, Tennessee, who was a MUFON state director, and she began to cast a wider net when she came across a case of 12 or 14 people along a beach, and suddenly 4 of the people could see a craft, and no matter how hard they tried to point it out to the others, they couldn't see what was so obvious to these 4. And so what's that about? And
what is the mechanism there? I saw
and the influences. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I remember that it reminds me of seeing this thing from the 70s, the great Kreskin, the mesmerist, that he had on J. Allen Hynek on the show, and he does this experiment where he essentially hypnotizes this group of people into thinking that they're seeing a flying saucer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Kreskin was actually the mentalist. He claimed to be claimed an interest in UFOs and psychic phenomena. I was actually fortunate to do an interview with him one time, and anyway, he claimed some of his abilities were actually for real, more than just tricks. He believed in psychic phenomena.
Oh yeah, he was the real deal. I've seen him in action. I know people who experience his talents. He's the real deal. And here, one of the few people who do have that ability of non-locality. He collects information that there's absolutely no way he could have obtained. No doubt about it. That is doable, and I've seen it manifest in many ways. But we're talking about, what you gentlemen are talking about is the influence of some outside force on the individual, the UAP making one person see it but not others. We hear that continuously. It's like a selective process. Or it may be something about their sensory perception, their brain, that allows them to see it while others can't for some reason. We don't know, but is it truly coming from external or the internal of the individual? Like the DMT experience, you have to give the person the dimethyltryptamine, the ayahuasca, that hallucinogenic chemical. It induces that kind of so-called hallucination, but here again, they have the same feeling in some ways that are described by the NDEers and those that interact with the non-human intelligences. They're communicating basically with other beings, other entities, and they experience or believe in an afterlife. They think there's something to do with consciousness. They're not their body. They do see geometric patterns, but they don't think other people experience that with the UAP or the NDE. There are similarities. There are also unique differences too. So it could very well be influencing their sensory system, that chemical, and not in others. And why should it be? In terms of DMT and UAPers. So this is very specific, but the key is this: are they passing into another world? Because they feel that they're meeting intelligent entities, they're communicating with them, time and space are altered, similar stuff that the UAPers are essentially saying. And when they when these people are given psilocybin or DMT, they're finding in a few studies, again, the most recent one we talked about earlier, a good percentage of them, this is what really moves me, and I forget the exact numbers, but we're talking in the hundreds, but about a quarter or so of that 100 were atheists. After taking the DMT, something like a third of the quarter, and I can't remember the absolute number, but it was 40, 50, a surprisingly high number, then believes in a supreme being. Wow. DMT actually shifted something that's significant in terms of their personal beliefs, and science says that's not reality, right? Well, it is. If it can alter one's beliefs that dramatically on such a significant level about such an important thing, that's reality to me, and that's the basis of philosophers to figure out. And I think eventually, 100 years, who knows when, society will move maybe in that direction, looking more at the non-physical evidence, believing more so what people who are telling us on podcasts, interviews, we write about, talk about, like we're doing now. They are experiencing something that simply can't be documented quantitatively, only qualitatively. Can't apply the principle of the scientific method, which we all know. And that leaves us high and dry. So we can sound a little aberrant to the average individual that doesn't really care about this. Not to put them down at all. For some reason, here again, we're different. We're wired different. Like the person who only likes to skydive or risk death by going up Mount Everest. They got that thrill gene. Well, we're all different in some way. We're tuned this way. This is what thrills us. So we like to seek the truth. The truth thrills us, and we do see the truth. The similarities, like we're noting. We're trying to tease the information. We're looking at, and Brent does this beautifully. Get at that needle in the haystack. Is there something here that we're overlooking that is giving us a aha moment? Mm-hmm. Is it a survey like this that is similar to the survey that Dr. Kenneth Ring, psychologist, did with his NDEers and UAPers? Similar results to our UAP results. And again, not purely AUP. It was physical and non-physical. Different phenomena, but interacting with non-human entities. That's the key. Whatever shape, size, angels, celestial beings, wolves, shape-shifting beings, whatever. Boy, they all come in different times, different types, right? And so the DMT is an external event, but it's allowing their brain, this chemical that is produced endogenously in such micro doses, so small in an area of the brain, of the brainstem, does it actually exert a force on human behavior? Is it actually doing something to allow us to pierce the veil, shut down a little bit of the left side, allowing us to see an alternate reality, as people are claiming they are doing? When Straussman met with John Mack, the psychiatrist from Harvard who did the research with alien abduction individuals, they compared notes about what their subjects experienced under the different facilitators, DMT and the UAP, and they were literally blown away, as Straussman said, literally, quote unquote, blown away by the similarity of the reports by their subjects. And we continue to see that. We continue to see similarities with what Hynek said back in the 60s. We're dealing with a phenomenon so strange to our terrestrial mode of thought. It's a physical and a non-physical. People forget this. Newbies coming in, new agers, whatever, and I give them credit. I love them. Keep seeking the truth. Keep listening to shows like this. You're on the right path. I commend you, man. I really commend. I wish I had shows like this when I was growing up. Not that only, kids and 20, 30, 40, 50-year-olds are older people are listening to you guys too. But you know what I mean. You're on the right path, people. You're on the right path. Keep doing it. And be careful who and what you believe. I'm not saying believe me. Be careful what I say. Be careful. There's a lot of sense and nonsense on your show. We all know that. You're not going to say it. You interview some people, if I may say, Brent. There's a lot, and I hear it all the time. I'm not talking about your show. I'm telling the audience as consumers, don't interpret everything you hear literally. I find myself getting into that habit sometimes. I step back and say, wait a minute, this is a bunch of bullshit. Be careful what you
have a healthy sense of skepticism, but not so much skepticism that you discount everything.
It's a fine balance. It's a tough balance to achieve and to maintain consistency with that. Correct. And a lot of personality, feelings, experience, etc. So look, is it the brain that's allowing us to see this? Is the left brain shutting down, like the neuroanatomist said when she had her stroke? Or is something from outside actually tweaking our brain, making us therefore more sensitive, allowing us physiologically to see them better? It's hard to know for sure when telepathy is going on, as they all say. That apparently they never speak, or very few do, right? They all talk via the airways. So,
well, one of the things I'd like to bring up at this point, sorry, just barged in, but I mean, these, like the John Hopkins study, they did a survey 2,561 DMT users and experiencers, and we're talking about how the brain is wired. And what I'd like to see come out in a journal article is this study that's been going on with Gary Nolan of Nolan Labs at Stanford and Christopher Kit Green, who actually in 1972 was, asked by the director of the CIA, Richard Helms, to, be a person who would be an analyst and a handler of people like Israeli psychic Uri Geller and some of the psychics and the scientists like at Stanford Research Institute, which he was quite skeptical of that in the beginning. And then after some experiences with Geller, he realized, I think especially, that this guy really can see things at a distance. He does have, and he realized also the UFO apparitional element involved in these cases. And so now he's still quietly doing his research. And Gary Nolan says, he's come on board recently, and they're doing MRI scans of people who are experiences and people who say they're absent experiences in their life, like some of the experiencers, and concentrating on a lot of police, military people, night watchmen, people who appear to be quite credible and have had experiences like being hit by beams of light from UFOs, and looking at their brains and going through their medical records. And they've got over 100 people who are experiences and say that in their brains, there's a higher density neuronal connection between the head of the caudate and the putamen. I hope I'm saying that right.
Mm-hmm.
Bob,
caudate putamen. Yeah,
and that this is absent in non-experiencers. And Gary Nolan told me that they're going to do a journal article in the future, which I don't know when that will be, but to me that would be a boost. Although we can't see what these people see themselves, if we can actually see changes going on in their brains that either were there to begin with or else were caused by these interactions with these beings or these energies or whatever the heck we're talking about here, this would be a way for science eventually to become, more and more involved in this. And I'm hoping something does come out of this. I think it's long overdue, the study that they're working on.
Brent, let's talk a little bit about this book that you published in 2004, Visitors from Hidden Realms. And I want to hit on a couple of points, and probably what we'll do the next time we have you on, we'll talk a little bit more about the book too. But just because there is a lot in this book, and not a very long book, but you pack a lot in. So this is related to what we're talking about, and this is kind of this idea of the role of like a shamanistic role of these experiences, and kind of like the shamanic nature of them. And we've kind of been hitting this whole time that like these things are life changing, and that is very much within the shamanic tradition of an experience that changes your life, changes your outlook completely. If you've seen what was that Sergio called, Witness of Another World, or Witness to Another World?
Yeah,
Alan Stievelman documentary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So like, if you've seen that documentary, that's very well done about the guy in Chile that had this experience as a teenager, and kind of like his reintegration into this tribe that he was descended from in Chile. And so, but there's a wider aspect that you talk about in the book too, that is about kind of like these Native American sites and kind of their connection to some of this energy and some of this phenomenon. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's actually a gentleman named John Burke who wrote a book back in 2005 called Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty, with a guy with the last name of Hallberg, who John Burke unfortunately has passed on, but Hallberg has a Kaj Hallberg, Kaj Hallberg has a website where he has a PDF file of this book, so that people can still get to read it. And I did an interview with him about using all this instrumentation that he used, going from sites in England and across the United States and down into Central America, ancient sites. And he was amazed again and again at the the strong, magnetic fields, electrical fields associated with the sites that these ancient people considered very sacred and special. And he wondered how was it again and again that they located and picked these sites, as places to be a sacred space to meditate in and do spiritual practices. And he also noted that there was this what he called the 3 a.m. wow, that the geomagnetic energy would fluctuate at a maximum level around 3 o'clock in the morning. And this was something that came up in Dr. Strassman's DMT book, that 3 a.m., the pineal's melatonin level is at its highest peak. And melatonin, we do know, increases lucidity or vividness in the dream state at that time. The body temperature drops. But if some people believe that the melatonin is actually the key that we're looking for in the DMT search, that it's there's an enzyme that's involved that alters it to a DMT type chemistry. And so a number of people are looking at 3 a.m. John Keel, even in Fate magazine back in '94, wrote about the magic hour of 3:20 a.m. and how he noticed a lot of contacts and things, strange things, and earth energies changing too at that time. So this is another connect the dots type thing. I mean, it's what we all try to do, make correlations with these different things. But it looks like, Keel was looking at what he called window areas where things just keep reoccurring. It'll flare up and it'll die down. Then, years later, the same area gets hit again. And he talked about gathering these survey maps that the U.S. Geological Survey had flown back in the 50s and 60s aircraft over the United States and put on maps where there were these magnetic anomaly sites. And this is, of course, John Burke's book, of course, was further confirmation of that. And I think the time factor, Valley said early morning seems to be when most of the landings and probably the contacts occur. And I know other people have been researching the 3 a.m. factor, and so I think little by little it's trying to understand what different factors are in common, like we've been talking about with the experiencers, the way they process the information psychically, mentally, or whatever, and what forces in the here and now may be involved. And, we're looking at, we went like myself with Keel and Valley and studying UFOs. I got into all this. I'm fascinated by, Joshua Cutchins and Timothy Renner's book, Where the Footprints In. Mm-hmm. They took it from the Bigfoot end, and make all these correlations between these paranormal things and orbs, UFOs. And if we could just get everybody to be more multidisciplinary and interested in comparing notes, but everybody pretty much like cryptozoology, that's my field. If a cryptozoologist is out, there's a UFO, there's quite a number of them that will ignore that report and just document the cryptid event, and vice versa. A UFOologist will not pay attention a lot of times to the paranormal or to the cryptid event. They're strictly there to find out about the UFO.
So they don't get the full picture.
They don't get the full picture, and I think that's what it's all about, is trying to connect all these dots, make all these associations that need to be established. And there was a book I was reading about how, like in China and India, that many of the temples were actually built on locations where mysterious balls of light had appeared. And so there's been a lot of this things going back to the ancient past, like Jacques Vallée's Passport to Magonia back in '69, studying a lot of the fairy lore, the elementals, and there's just we have to cast a wider net, and the shamanistic elements. I think the shamans were, the early experiences are very similar to the contact experiences of today. The Marian apparitions is another area that's fruitful to explore.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. So would you say that like these areas, like these like the mounds or these Native American sites are built over some kind of energy path or something? Because you do talk about an experience that you had, I think, at some site in Alabama.
Well, there was a site up actually in Portsmouth, Ohio, which isn't too far, about an hour's drive from Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Oh, okay.
That
there's a connection.
Yeah, and this place that had been we were meditating in this large horseshoe-shaped earthwork. Located today at a park, and across from it's a school which is also sitting on a large U-shaped mound, which you can't get to because it's covered over. A lot of what was there is, of course, destroyed, but back in 1848 or so, I think it was 1848, there was archaeologists who were there and mapped this all out. And we can go around Portsmouth area and across the Ohio River into Kentucky and still see bits and pieces. I mean, it was massive. It stretched on for miles. It was a sacred pathway that people would walk during their rituals and ceremonies. And it obviously involved connecting a lot of these sites with the rise of, different planetary bodies at certain times of the year. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty sophisticated. But yeah, there was balls of light seen at this particular site. And when we were there, my wife and I got permission from the mayor and his wife to go into this large horseshoe-shaped mound to prepare the site for the group that was going to be going in there. We were part of a tour group with the Association for Research and Enlightenment, working with Doctors Greg and Laura Little. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we had saged the area, and we thought we were doing really good. And then we realized we had actually failed to, in our enthusiasm, to do one basic thing. We hadn't smudged ourselves. We should have smudged ourselves before we went around smudging the whole area. So my wife and I had left this big foot-long feather on a little blanket nearby, and it wasn't there. So I said, well, okay, we'll just do it by hand. We got this little bowl here, and I'll smudge you and you smudge me. So we do that. As soon as we get done, the feather is back on the blanket again, And so I get the, tape recorder and I record what happened. And we played it back. You could just barely hear me, and I was right there at it. And my wife was talking off and on. There was somebody mowing a yard nearby. There was a helicopter that kept going up. There was traffic. We were in the city, and none of this you could hear. And it was just kind of unusual. And then the people were brought in, and this is going to be a long story, but anyway, Greg says, okay, you tell them what you feel about the site. You just, and everybody sat in kind of a circle. And it turned out that people felt vibrations. They kind of saw inner lights as they were meditating. 2 people actually felt a reincarnation connection to the site. But when I was talking, it was like there was a sound barrier or something. unless I was looking directly at them, they said that they couldn't hear me. And I should have been talking loud enough that they could have. And then later, we're downtown at a restaurant, and my wife is sitting across from the mayor's wife, who both of them helped to facilitate us using this site to do what we were doing. And she later confided that when we were talking, that my wife and her were talking, they're sitting just like 3 feet across from each other. Suddenly, my wife's voice to her was where she could hardly hear, what she was saying. And she thought, my goodness, am I having an anxiety attack, or what's going on with me? She's thinking all this. And they had been talking about when she was, about religion and how they were raised, and as young children, how the church affected them. And she had just described how when she was the mayor's wife described how when she was a young girl, the church she had been going to burned down. Well, that night, I woke up, and it was early in the morning, and suddenly I'm in my mind's eye, I'm seeing like a shaman's face in a costume, and then I see these little blue flames, kind of like the in a circle, kind of like the gas flames on a gas stove, and so anyway, I get up and I go into the bathroom, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't know if this is real or means anything, but I don't mean any disrespect to any shamanic presence that we may have encountered here at this site, but this is just to help to facilitate the sessions. I'm not claiming I'm a shaman or anything like that. And then about a week later, I call up, and I'm talking to the mayor's wife, and she tells me about what had happened to her, and that since the conversation she had with my wife, another of her childhood churches that she had been to burned down. Since talking, they never did find out that she heard what caused that fire, but I always wondered, was it a gas stove? But I don't know if that's the story you're talking about. But I did have. We used to have a sweat lodge here behind our house, and we had sweats, and we had a lady from Alabama who would usually led the sweats. She was of Cherokee and Choctaw ancestry, and had quite a number of very interesting experiences, including some connected with the UFO frame of reference. And anyway, it was after one of those sweats that I had a feeling that I needed to go to a certain sacred site called the Kinloch Shelter.
Yeah, that's the one that, yeah.
Yeah, and that was down the Bankhead Forest in Alabama, a huge forested area, federal land. And anyway, it's considered quite sacred by a number of people. I read one account where a guy had gone there, and he had this out-of-body experience where suddenly he felt connected with the universe, one of those real positive things. And so anyway, I went there, and I'm excited. There are petroglyphs, rock carvings, and I'm walking around and taking pictures, making drawings. And, the sweat lodge lady, who's on the medicine path, she informs me, Brent, sit your ass down over at this rock and get out of your head. That's what she said. And I said, it's very hard right now. I'm just, if spirit wants to contact me, I just need to try harder. I'm really excited. So anyway, about a week or two later, I'm in the sweat lodge, about the second round, and I start seeing some imagery. It's like circular concentric circles or something, and I'm there analyzing it. I'm thinking, okay, this is maybe something to do with the optic nerve, phosphenes or something. And then suddenly it takes a shape that reminds me of the footprints I had seen carved at Kinloch site. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, because all of a sudden, right before my eyes, it changes into that. And so it got me to thinking about that. And I had made notes. We went to another site nearby before going to that one, Kinloch. And at that one nearby, there were carvings as well. And I'm sorry about the length of this story, but
no, it's
anyway,
totally okay. That's fine.
The things that I had jotted down, one of them was Southern Cross. The word came to me, Southern Cross, and I really puzzled over that because I couldn't think of what, was it something I read, whatever. It just made no sense. And then a few months later, I'm over in Memphis, Tennessee, visiting Doctors Greg and Laura Little. And I was introduced to Andrew Collins from England, who's you see him on Ancient Aliens quite a bit. He's all over the world visiting different ancient sacred sites. And Greg and Andrew are writing a number of books together, the latest being the Denis Savin Origins. Yeah. And anyway, he's telling me and showing me some illustrations of a book that he's got that hasn't come out yet.
He's a big Göbekli Tepe guy, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Yeah. And at the time, he had this book coming out called the Cygnus Mystery, and Greg and he were working together and on some sites here in North America that connected also with Cygnus. And so he was, they were going around to these different sites, but this was all new to me. And so eventually when, I noticed some of his symbols and things looked like things I had seen in my mind's eye. And there was also that bird's foot thing that had a strong resonance with. And it was part of this Cygnus thing. It was supposed to be like this sacred bird motif that had been connected with different places, including the Tepe site, and then when at the time, thousands of years ago, Cygnus would have been part of where the North Star was, because the Earth kind of shifts a little over time, and Deneb was the North Star, and when the book finally came out, I'm reading it, the Cygnus Mystery, and come and find out there was another cross. They call it the twin cross of the North Star, the Northern Cross. It was the Southern Cross, which was visible from pretty much from the lower part of the world, the lower hemisphere, like in Peru, and so I felt like that was where this had all kind of was leading. And I had, connected with Benita Luz, a psychotherapist who had spent over a year in Peru and had led tours down in Peru. And she physically introduced me to the Peruvian whistles, which are really trippy. And I found out that Rick Strassman, sorry. Rick Strassman who wrote the DMT, the Spirit Molecule, actually one of his subjects was a person who made the Peruvian whistles, replicas of them there in New Mexico, Don Wright. Turns out Don Wright was one of the 60 people in his study, Jeremiah, and I after interviewing Rick Strassman from a magazine, the interview is also in the book, Visitors from Hidden Realms. I said that I wrote to Dr. Strassman. I said, you talked about how maybe chanting certain instrument sounds, maybe the vibrations, kind of like resonation, like when you break a glass, a certain sound, maybe something happens with the pineal gland if there's certain chemistry there, like DMT or DMT-like chemistry, could cause a release of this and cause these experiences. And he I asked him if he'd ever heard the Peruvian whistling vessel. So this was a huge coincidence. And he said, yeah, there's a guy who come by here and introduced him. They're pretty trippy. That would sort of fill the bill. And but he couldn't remember the guy's name. And so then I went back to Don Wright, who I bought 4 of his vessels, which I use in demonstrations and doing meditations. And he says, yeah, I was one of the 60 volunteers. So then I went back to Strassman and says, yeah, Don Wright. And he says, oh, yeah, okay. And it was in his book, he's the subject known as Jeremiah. And it's it's pretty wild, but I think I'm probably going on too long with this.
all kinds of just coincidences and synchronicities is kind of where you're going with that.
Yeah, it is.
Think. Yeah.
And just recently I had used one of Don Wright's description he gave me about his experiences, which he's in a laboratory. He sees at one point, and he sees different things. And I actually copied this down in case we got onto this subject here. And he wrote me each segment experience of DMT took me to a completely different world. In a sense, I seem to have a deja vu experience. An example was one in which I discovered myself in a round, multi-floored facility in which there were transparent capsules containing human essences. I had the impression that human essences were there waiting to physically manifest. I clearly seemed to recognize I had been there before. And that made me think of 2 of people who have these alien abduction or contact memories, where they're aboard a craft and they're in some sort of laboratory type setting, and they see people in these jars or tubes or whatever.
Sure.
But anyway, sorry about jumping all over the place there.
Oh no, that's fine, Brent. That's fine. That's like that's another thing that I was going to mention too. Like Bob brought this up, like some of the transformative stuff is like the role of synchronicity in all this. Like you were talking about how making the motion of like a puppet or like a marionette. When you have all this like synchronicity storm, and it's happened to me, like you feel like there's something else going on, something higher than yourself. So I definitely hear what.
Without question, and when you become aware of the beyond coincidence nature of a synchronicity, where there's the combination of timing and of course meaning. There has to be meaning of such a profound nature that provides insight or unique evidence to help you solve an aspect of life, and that is a synchronicity. And I've had many, enough that was so extreme, like you're referring to, and we could all share stories, and it's a little boring at some level, but they're so meaningful to us personally that you become convinced. And the question is, what's going on? It's is somebody actually showing you something? Is there something to this? Is this the way reality operates? That's not in our unified field theory. But if we seek it, maybe we can get answers like this, where they just appear magically. Timing and meaning. That helps us with answers. I wish I can do this with the stock market, of course, but it doesn't seem to work that way.
Right.
Yeah, some people do, though. It's like the story. I put a little story in my book, and I forget where I got it from, but I heard this person talking. Again, it's a personal account, so be careful of face value. But he says he had such an urge to contact a particular researcher who wrote a book, and he wanted to incorporate his ideas about the book in his thesis for school, for his PhD. He decided not to do it and regretted it. Shortly thereafter, he said he went on a vacation with his wife in a remote island in the South Pacific. I forget the name. One of those pogo places. He's in the hotel, and he writes his name in the book. They check in. While he's writing his name in the book, however, he notes the name of that professor who he had wanted to communicate with. He thought really nothing of it, just a coincidence. Well, lo and behold, as he explains, he sees a man who looked like the professor. He had seen his picture, apparently. He looks like it, and he was so stunned that he introduced himself and asked me that question: "Are you Professor, I forget his name, Hutchins, was it, who taught at XYZ?" And he said, "Well, yes." Now, they sat down and discussed the issue at hand at length, to his more than his satisfaction. Is that's not only timely, but obviously meaning there things like this happen. Could that just be a random act of nature? Of course. But when they happen repeatedly to a person, to the point where they actually rely on it, wow. And then you combine, again, anecdotal information, but you also alluded to, Brent, you did this too, about the brain. We're kind of touching upon that. And, it makes sense to do so because there is evidence that the brain does respond a little differently when some people are remote viewing. Like I think you mentioned the Stanford Research Institute and Hal Puthoff. There was research that was funded by the CIA, and they do see that the temporal cortex, the side of your brain, is actually a little bit more active during the process of remote viewing. But it's not necessarily proving anything that this is the spot where funky stuff happens, where we can manage space and time, not be impeded by these kind of barriers, and access information from beyond, from the Soviet Union during the Cold War, from elsewhere to our benefit. Well, very few can do it very well. One of them, of course, is Ingo Swann. Everybody's heard of that name, and McGonagall. There were a few others, but Ingo Swann seemed to have that special ability, regarded the best of the best. What's interesting is that he showed a high incidence of a very unusual 7 hertz EEG spike. It was a 7 hertz EEG spike in slow wave activity over the occipital lobe, right behind the brain, obviously involved in visual processing, among other things, but mainly visual, remote viewing. Interesting, huh? 7 hertz. Remember I mentioned it earlier? 7 hertz, the Schumann resonance. The similarity, obviously, it's an exact identical duplication of EEG activity within the theta wave frequency band of the wave. The theta wave, and we all experience it when we meditate or while we're sleeping and transitioning into that deep feeling of, hey man, I'm going to be going to sleep soon, right? That's theta, and you're about 7-ish hertz in that vicinity. And you kind of like to try to duplicate that while in meditation. And for many, it takes depends on the technique, about 10 to 20 minutes to get there. And it takes some training, to get there, but not asleep. Don't fall asleep. You know what I mean? Hang out there. But here again, you're suppressing the left hemisphere, allowing the right hemisphere to flourish. And we do see evidence of enhanced right hemispheric activity during transcendental medication, as well as a richer white matter and a higher density myelinization of the brain in those who meditate. There's something there. I'm not exactly sure what, but why? So Mr. Swan shows it. Select cases show it. We see evidence of ESP, clear evidence of ESP in so many experiments. Windbridge Institute and Dr. Julie Bichel published numerous experiments, so quadruple blinded experiments, documenting quite convincingly, I thought, that mediums can very successfully obtain information from individuals that were so well controlled that they deemed it impossible for them to acquire the kind of knowledge that they were able to share, to give the person, the person who held that information. Here again, what does that mean? Is someone who goes into a trance, or the different ways to do it, a physical medium, a mental medium. There's different types of ways they access, so to speak, this information field. And what do we call it? The Akashic Records, maybe, the black hole where all information exists, apparently, according to some astrophysicists like Dr. Rudy Shield, that Brent mentioned earlier. So they're showing the ability to either read the person's mind who has obviously that information and desires additional proof that the person in question is alive and can exchange information to prove that the person is still existing in some reality. Well, they have provided that convincing proof to people trying to obtain information or to test whether or not these sitters can actually accurately identify information. They do so 80-90% of the time. That, to me, that's convincing. Dean Radin, of course, we can go on and on about the kinds of ways in which people can physically manipulate structure, physical matter, using their mind and intention. These effects are incredibly subtle, but they are statistically relevant to the extent where it is more than convincing. But yet science doesn't acknowledge it or accept it. Yet it should be accepted because of its the nature of the experiment and the controls that are implemented by the experimenters. So it is debatable. It's certainly a source of debate. But combine all of this, and I try to in my book. What does this all mean? Brent alluded to it, connecting the dots. What does this all mean? And here again, we can only speculate. Other than the thing I can say with absolute certainty, there's something a lot more than we know right now. What a cop out that is. We all know that. We all know that, right? But okay.
That's the one thing That's the one thing we know for sure.
Yeah, but it's kind of cool knowing it, playing around with it, and trying to fine tune it. Yeah, did we make progress in 60 years with nuts and bolts in the UFOs? Not really. When Senator Rubio was asking for answers to what's flying in our skies, maybe posing a threat to aviation industry. If it's extraterrestrial, let's know about it. Give us the capital D. We see the small d. We see it leaked out in varying ways with ATIP and Senator Reid and here and there and the other things. Skinwalker, it's leaking out, but everybody's waiting for the capital D. But us, we know the capital D. We don't have to be told. Right. It's the general public that needs it on breaking news at 6 o'clock. So it's still interesting what's going on with ATIP and DeLong, and we can milk that. It's worthy of some but little discussion because it's just noise, and they're using the system for monetary means, but there could be some elements of truth there. I don't know what the meta materials is all about. Maybe there's something there. Let's wait and see. But why the speculation, the secrecy, and as if there's a purpose or a secondary gain associated with it, like a hidden agenda, as we all suspect, by some unacknowledged access group for whatever reason to control how society interprets, views, discusses the phenomena. They know the phenomena exists. They don't have the answers. As far as I'm concerned, they don't have the answers. So they don't want to disclose because why? The public's going to be banging on their doors. What the F is going on here, man? And they don't have answers. So what are they going to say? Well, these beings do exist. They've always been here. They gave us the 10 Commandments. They make right angles in stone walls. 112,000 years ago. Yeah, they did all this shit. They don't want to do that. They speculate. They don't know. And if they did know that, if that was the truth, right? This 4 billion year old planet probably went through a lot of civilizations, intelligences, and dinosaur periods, right? The whole shebang is 12.8 billion. We're newbies on the block, but maybe, just maybe, and why not? There is this other intelligence that thrives. It's so advanced, and of course, so different. Everybody's not carbon-based like us, of course. Similar in some ways and different in most ways. But how they're so advanced and different? How can they communicate with us successfully? They make themselves look like idiots half the time as they're trying to tell us, hey, here we are. And why the heck do they get sperm and ovum from us? Why don't they just go to a sperm bank or any fertility clinic and they could open a drawer, and I'm sure they have the ability to take whatever the heck they want, Yeah. I don't get it.
Yeah, they should be done by now.
Yeah. Right.
Well, gentlemen, I think that's a good place. That's a good place to end, to leave it.
I did just want to give Robert a chance, though, to to promote some of his books, including his latest, this Unseen Forces, which is a lot of the things we've been talking about today deals with.
Yeah, I more or less been paraphrasing some of the information, trying to basically make sense of it all. It's similar to Brent's book, where it presents some of this evidence that we're touching upon from different areas of the phenomena, and that's the essence of it. And what does it mean? And not that we have the answers, but essentially it involves some aspect of consciousness, maybe interdimensional activity, and does science answer some of these questions? Are we touching upon it? Where do we need to go in terms of the best kind of research to apply to better understand the underlying essence of the phenomena? And it does exist with the individual experiencer, the essence of their experience. We need to better understand that and freeze trying to get at that. And we see John Hopkins and other researchers in academia doing so as well. And they to be commended, but we need to go further in that direction, the essence, the non-physical nature of this unique phenomena. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about my book, Unseen Forces, Integration of Science, Reality, and You, and I do hope some of you enjoy it. I make much less than a cup of coffee. It's not for me. It's more, hopefully, for you to think.
Right.
Go to it, man. Stay safe, everybody.
Absolutely. Robert, what is your what's your website, and what is your where can people get the books? Are they available like Amazon?
Yeah,
okay.
Amazon or from the website bobdavisspeaks.com.
Okay.
And my other books too, Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence, and my first book, The Ufo Phenomenon, Should I Believe? Whatever turned you on.
All right. And Brent, where can people find Visitors from Hidden Realms and your other books and Alternate Perceptions? They're all on Amazon, and the Alternate Perceptions is on the apmagazine.info, and we have a new issue at the first of each month. And then we archive, what was there previously. And so you can read the current issue by going to that website, or you can go back and at the top of the page, there's links to check previous issues. So hopefully nothing gets lost in the shuffle. And also, Brent, we should mention you are going to be part of Strange Realities 2020. Yes, sir. Online conference. Looking forward to that. Do you know what you'll probably be speaking about? Well, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, I guess. Kind of like we've been talking about today. And, of course, John Keel, Jacques Vallée, and all the good stuff, the high strangeness and the crossover phenomena and things that we're still scratching our head over. I don't have the answers. I'm sorry.
I thought we provided the answers the past 2 hours here.
Yeah.
I thought we were talking nothing but fact. You with me? You with me, everybody?
All right, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Hold on the line for us. We're going to close this section out, and guys, we'll be right back to close out the show, as usual, on Conspirinormal. All right, welcome back to Conspirinormal, guys. That was a long but informative interview with Robert Davis and Brent Raynes.
Two very, very deep minds with Brent Raynes' long experience studying this stuff and his connections to a lot of people in the field, and then with Robert's background in neuroscience and his involvement in the free study. There's just a lot of material about the nature of consciousness, the nature of experience, non-human entities, psychedelics, kind of, ran the whole gamut.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very cool to have somebody on that's, I guess, that's an academic. I always enjoy that, and to see that the acceptance that this is having in some people in the academic community is really cool to me as well. And Brent is always a wealth of information. He definitely knows what he's talking about, and he'll be joining us, like I said, at Strange Realities 2020, our little online conference that we're doing this year, and which right now the tickets are at $20 now, And I want to thank the people that have already bought tickets and the people that have bought tickets since the time between recording this and posting this, which is almost 2 weeks. So thank you guys. We've got a great lineup for you on the weekend of September 25th, 26th, and 27th. And there's also Patreon. Seraphiel can tell you what we got on there.
You can go to patreon.com/Conspirinormal to see all of last year's presentations from Strange Realities 2019. We will be broadcasting that for everybody soon, but you've got an advanced way to see that for now. We also do something about every week. We were doing some extra audio content every week, but we have been substituting that with some of these presentations, so we'll be getting back into that. For as little as $1, you get access to all that. And if you don't feel comfortable with a subscription, you can give a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com.
Absolutely, guys. Well, I want to thank you all for listening, and we will be back next time with some more interesting, crazy stuff on Conspirinormal. StrangeRealitiesConference.com.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.